So here we go. But as soon as they came down within sight of the harbour, they saw that there was no question either of passing unseen or of being caught. The streets round the harbour were thronged with people, fishermen and shopkeepers in their Sunday suits, wives in their best summer dresses, and more crowding tourists than the children had ever seen in Trewhisk before. All the boats, swaying level with the quays on the high tide, were moored at one side, leaving a clear rectangle of water marked out with strings of bobbing white floats. As they came down the road, they heard the faint thud of a starting pistol, and 6 brown bodies flung themselves into the water and began thrashing in a white flurry of spray across the marked course. The crowd began to cheer. "It must be the end of the swimming gala," Jane said eagerly, caught up in the carnival atmosphere below them. "Let's go and watch for a minute." "For heaven's sake," Simon said in despair, "we're on a mission. We've got to find Great Uncle Merry before we do anything else." But there was no answer at the doorbell of the grey house, as they stood on the doorstep with knots of shirt-sleeved visitors clattering past them up and down the hill. And when Simon had gone round to the back and retrieved the front door key from its secret place in the tool shed, they went inside to find the house quite deserted. Great Uncle Merry's bed was neatly made, but there was no sign in his bedroom or anywhere else to tell them where he had gone. Mrs. Polk was nowhere to be found. There were 3 plates of cold mackerel and salad covered up on the kitchen table, left for their lunch, but that was all. The house was spotless, silent, neat, and empty. "Where can he have gone? And where's Mrs. Polk?" "Well, that's easy enough. She'll be outside watching the swimming with everyone else. You know how she was drooling about the carnival today. Well, let's go and find her. She must know where he is." "Tell you what," Barney said, "you two go down the harbour and I'll run up to the top of the hill and see if Gummery has gone up there after all. I'd be able to see him if he's climbing the headland. It takes quite a time to get to the top." Simon thought for a moment. "All right, that seems sensible enough. But for goodness sake, keep out of sight of the yacht if you see it coming back. And come down to us as quick as you can. We don't want to get separated. We'll be down there on the quay where the start of the swimming is." "Righto." Barney made off, but then turned back. "I say, what are you going to do with the manuscript? If we don't find Gummery and we're all on our own, do you think it's safe to go on carrying it about?" "Well, a lot safer than I'd feel if we left it anywhere," Simon said grimly, looking down at the case in his hand. "I'm going to hang on to it, whatever happens." "Oh well," Barney said cheerfully, "don't drop it in the harbour. That's all. Cheerio, shan't be long." "I'm glad he's so bright about it all," Jane said, as the front door slammed. "I wish I were. It's as if there was someone waiting behind every corner to pounce on us. I only feel safe when I'm in bed." "Cheer up," said Simon. "You're still suffering from last night. I was scared then too. But I'm not now. Try and forget about it." "Well, that's all very well," said poor Jane miserably, "but everyone seems to be turning out to be bad now, and it isn't even as if we knew what sort of badness it is. Why do they all want a manuscript so much?" "Well," Simon wrinkled his forehead, trying to remember what Great Uncle Merry had said on the first day, "it's the Grail they want, isn't it? Because it stands for something, somehow, and that's why Gummery wants to find it as well. It's like 2 armies fighting in history. You're never quite sure what they're actually fighting about, but only that one wants to beat the other. Great Uncle Merry's like an army sometimes, all in one person. Those times when he goes all peculiar and distant and you feel he's not quite there. Well, there you are then. It's the same with the others. They're a kind of bad army. Up on the standing stones last night, even before we knew they were there, you could still feel the badness." "I know," Jane said fervently. "Oh dear, I should feel much better if we knew where Great Uncle Merry was. We shall soon know, as we shall find Mrs. Polk. Buck up, Jane." Simon patted her awkwardly on the shoulder. "Come on, let's go down to the harbour. Barney'll get there before us at this rate." Jane nodded, feeling a bit better. "Oh, Mother and Father will be coming back this afternoon. Do you think we ought to leave a note?" "No, we'll be back long before then." They went out of the grey house, leaving it to its silence, and walked down the hill to the harbour. Unfamiliar children were running all over the place, ignoring their anxious calling parents, and the sleepy little shop which sold ice cream down on the quay was festooned with flags and posters and doing a roaring trade. Simon and Jane threaded their way along the side of the harbour, through the wandering crowds to the course marked out for the swimming gala. But they felt as if they were paddling against a current. All the crowds were moving towards them, and when they reached the right place, they found everything was over. Only a few boys and girls dodging wet through the crowds in swimsuits, and the bobbing lines of floats on the empty water showed that there had been a swimming gala at all. One of the swimmers brushed past Simon, and as he glanced up at the wet brown body, he recognised the face below the dark water-flattened hair. It was Bill. The boy's mouth opened, and he paused belligerently. But then, in an instant, changing his mind, he scowled and disappeared, running barefoot through the crowds towards the front quay. "Hey, Jane! Jane!" Simon called urgently. She was a few paces ahead of him and had not noticed Bill. A deep voice said in Simon's ear, "Your young friend lost in's race. He'm not in a very good temper. They others be the same." Simon looked around and saw the beaming, wrinkled brown face of the old fisherman they had met on the day they first encountered the boy Bill. "Hello, Mr. Penhallow," he said, reflecting how odd the greeting sounded. "Was he in the swimming gala then?" "Aye, that he were. The race for the championship. Behaved himself badly as usual too. Lost by a few yards and turned his back on the winner when the lad went and thanked him for a good race." He chuckled. "The winner were my youngest." "Your son?" said Jane, who had turned back at Simon's call. She looked at Mr. Penhallow's weather-beaten face. He looked much too old to have a son young enough for a swimming race. "That's right," said the fisherman equably. "Tough little lad. Him 16 now, on leave from a merchant navy." "I say," said Simon, impressed, "could I join the merchant navy when I'm 16, do you think?" "You wait a while," said Mr. Penhallow, twinkling at him. "'Tis a hard life at sea." "Barney says he wants to be a fisherman like you now," Jane said, "with a boat like the White Heather." Mr. Penhallow laughed. "That's an idea, won't last long. I'd take him out with us one night if we were a bit bigger, and he'd soon change his tune." "Are you going out tonight?" "No, having a rest." Jane, suddenly feeling one of her shoes damp, looked down and found she was standing in a pool of water. She moved hurriedly. "Those swimmers must have splashed about a lot. There's puddles all along the quay." "Not just the swimming, my love," Mr. Penhallow said. "'Tis the tide. It came right over there this morning. Spring tides be higher than usual this month." "Oh, yes," said Simon. "Look, there are bits of seaweed right at the back of the path. It must have washed right up to the wall. Does it often come as high as that?" I knew it was the tide. "Not often. Once or twice a year, usually, March and September. 'Tis strange to have such big tides in August. I reckon 'tis because of those strong winds we've been having." "How low will it go down?" Jane said, fascinated. "Oh, a long way. The harbour don't look pretty at any low tide, but it do look worse at the biggest springs. Lot of stinking old mud and weed that you don't normally see. You wait till about 5 o'clock today. Still, I dare say you'll be watching carnival like everyone else then." "I expect so," Simon said vaguely. He was thinking furiously. It was as if the fisherman's words had touched a spring in his brain. "Mr. Penhallow," he said, carefully casual, "I suppose when you get a really low tide like that, there's lots more rocks than usual uncovered outside the harbour." "Oh, a good old lot," the fisherman said. "They do say 'tis possible to walk all the way round from Trewissick Harbour to the Dodman. That's 2-3 bays beyond Kamara Head. But that'd be nothing more than a tale. I dare say the rocks be uncovered, but the tide be coming up again before you was halfway there." Sorry. Jane was only half listening. "Mr. Penhallow, we were looking for Mrs. Polk. She's the lady who keeps house for us. Do you know her?" "No Molly Polk?" said Mr. Penhallow, chuckling. "I should say I do. Nice lass she used to be. Still is. But she turned a bit miserly when old Jim Polk died. Costing your mum and dad a pretty penny, I'll be bound. Do anything for a few extra pound with old Moll. Now I come to think of it, of course, she and your young friend's Bill's auntie too." "Mrs. Polk is?" Jane said, amazed. "That awful boy?" "Ah," Mr. Penhallow said placidly. "The two sides of the family don't have much to do with each other, mind. Most Trewissick forgets them even related. Don't suppose Moll likes people to know." "I think Great Uncle Merry told me once," Simon said. "I'd clean forgotten. He said Bill was Mrs. Polk's no-good brother's son." Jane said thoughtfully, "I wonder whether... Oh, well, it doesn't matter now. Have you seen her anywhere about?" "Let me see now. I did pass the time of day with her. Up on the front quay. She were all dressed up for the carnival, some funny affair on her head, helping with the procession most like. I reckon you'll still find her up by there, unless she's popped up to have her dinner." The crowds had thinned round them now, milling about instead on the front quay, with here and there groups of bandsmen in bright blue uniforms, clutching large curly silver instruments and wearing ill-fitting blue-peaked caps. Simon and Jane peered across the harbour, but they were too far away to be able to distinguish faces. "Well, I must be off to find my young Walter. Real cock-a-hoop he'll be. Remember me to our little fisherman, Miss Ears." Mr. Penhallow toddled off along the quay, grinning to himself. Jane, who had been wondering what it was about him that seemed different, realised for the first time that instead of the blue jersey and long thigh boots, he was in a stiff black suit and shoes that squeaked. "I don't think he should have talked like that about Mrs. Polk," she said, troubled. "You don't know, it might be important," Simon said. "Anyway, what are we going to do now? We've got to find Mrs. Polk to know where Great Uncle Mary's gone. But Mr. Penhallow says he saw her on the other side of the harbour, and we told Barney we'd meet him here. I wonder where Barney is. He surely had time to get up to the top of the road and back by now. Look, you go and see if Mrs. Polk is over there, and I'll wait here till he comes." Simon rubbed his ear. "I don't know. I don't like all this splitting up. We haven't got Great Uncle Mary, we haven't got Barney for the moment, and if you and I split up, nobody will have anybody else at all. Any one of us could get nobbled and the others wouldn't know. I think we ought to keep together." "Well, all right," Jane said. "We'll wait a bit longer. Let's go back to the corner of the front quay and we can cut him off. That's the only way down here. He'll have to pass it." As they walked back, they saw the Trewhisac band forming up across the harbour, with the crowd bobbing up and weaving around them, and children darting excitedly to and fro on the edge. One or two strange figures stood out among the white shirts and summer dresses, tall, fantastically coloured, decked with ribbons and leaves, with monstrous false heads set on their shoulders. They must be part of the carnival procession. "I think it's starting. Listen, what a horrible noise." The band had begun a wavering, brassy tune that resolved itself gradually into a recognisable march. "Oh, come on, it's not that bad," Jane said. "I expect they're more used to fishing than playing trumpets. Anyway, it's very cheerful sounding. I like it." "Let's sit on the wall here at the corner. We can catch Barney when he passes." Simon crossed into the road and looked up the hill. "I can't see any sign of him, but there's so many people about it's difficult to see properly." "Oh well," Jane hoisted herself up onto the wall, wincing as rough slate rubbed her skin behind the knees. "We'll just wait. Hey, listen, the music's getting louder." "Music?" said Simon. "Well, it is. Oh, look, the procession's started, and they're coming this way. I thought Mrs. Polk said they would go straight up the hill. Perhaps they go up from this corner of the harbour instead of the other, or perhaps they go all round the village first. Look, they're all dressed up, and they're playing that thing Mrs. Polk was singing this morning, the floral dance. We've got a good view anyway." Simon hopped up to sit on the wall beside her. Slowly the crowd drew near them along the front quay, children running and jumping about in front of the red-faced, puffing band. Behind them, edged by delighted, pushing throngs of visitors, came a dancing file of the fantastic figures they had seen from across the harbour, the monstrous heads lurching and hopping in a slow parody of dance, and others, masked and disguised, weaving in and out of the crowds. Here and there they swooped by on the bystanders, taking pretty girls by the hand, pretending to strike squealing old ladies with a ribboned wand, guiding the visitors and villagers to join hands and dance with them in rows across the width of the street. Pom pom de pom pom pom, the music boomed in the children's ears when they sat on the wall, and the crowds eddied all round them on the corner, overflowing up the hill as well as down. Jane, beaming round her in delight at the tops of the giant let's see if I can get it finished. Grinning heads, suddenly stared across the crowd. She pointed and shouted something in Simon's ear. Simon could hear nothing but the manic music thrumming around him till the walls seemed to shake. "What?" he shouted back. Jane ducked her head close to his ear. "There's Mrs. Polk, look, just over there, with feathers on her head, behind the man covered in leaves. Quickly, let's catch her." And before Simon could stop her, she had slipped down from the wall and was on the edge of the crowd. Simon jumped down after her and caught at her arm just as she was about to push her way across the crowd between two dancing, laughing files. "Not now, Jane!" But he too was swept along for several yards by the dancing crowd before he could draw her back into a clear space. They stood pinned against the far wall of the road, away from the harbour, hemmed in by others standing watching the carnival procession dance by. And that was why they did not see Barney, who had been threading his way down the hill road past the grey house, dodged between people's legs to slip round the corner of the wall, ignoring the procession, and run as fast as he could along the inner quay to the place where they had agreed to meet. All right, hopefully I've got enough time. Anyway, see you tomorrow for chapter 12. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.